Now, first of all, let me tell you, I'm not going to try to impress you about how many bass I can catch in the next 30 minutes. Instead, I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you some of the helpful hints and tips I've learned over the past 40 years about fishing one of the most versatile lures on the market today, the spinnerbait. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why is it the most versatile? Well, because it can be fished 12 months of the year. Summer, fall, winter, spring, cold water, hot water, muddy water, clear water. You can fish it from the surface of the water to as deep as you might want to fish it. It can be used in open water or in or through or around some of the thickest cover that's available. And more bass anglers are discovering that spinnerbaits are a must item in their tackle box. There are many different techniques in fishing these versatile lures, and in this show I hope to give you as many helpful techniques as possible, as well as the importance of the spinnerbait components: the hook, the skirt, the wire, the swivel, the weight, and even the blade, all of which have a major impact on the overall performance of the lure, as well as its fish catching capabilities. There are two basic types of spinnerbaits, and they're available in a variety of sizes from the 1/8 ounce up to the 5/8 ounce, and some are even made to weigh as much as 1 ounce. You've got a single spin and you've got the tandem spin, which is sometimes called the double blade. Now, the single has 1 blade and the tandem spin has 2 blades mounted on the same shaft. And believe it or not, both have their place. Perhaps the most versatile of the two is the single spin, because it can do it all. It works extremely well on a straight retrieve near or far below the surface. It can be fished very easily through many forms of cover, creating the feel that allows you to stay in contact with it at all times as it crawls through brush, treetops, and different forms of aquatic growth. It has superb fluttering qualities and has much more vibration than the double spin. It's far and away the most versatile and popular spinnerbait there is. Now, don't get the impression that I don't care much for the double blade, because I do. This rascal here is a 12-gauge double barrel bass catcher. The tandem is 2 blades working in unison, and it's a great lift lure and creates a tremendous amount of water resistance, which keeps the lure near the surface. They're great lures for buzzing just under the surface or for working within a few feet of it. They're pretty tough to work down deep, but do a fantastic job for covering wide areas in a relatively short period of time, and produce best in a clear, warm, shallower water situation. Earlier we mentioned the variety of sizes in spinnerbaits, from the 1/8 ounce all the way up to the 5/8 ounce size. Well, all have their place. As a general rule, smaller sizes like the 1/8 ounce up to the 3/8 ounce size are used for clear water or spooky fish, and the larger sizes, let's say from the 3/8 ounce all the way up to the 5/8 ounce, well, they're used for darker water or aggressive fish. Let me tell you something. Did you know that the size, the shape, and the thickness of the wire arm affects a spinnerbait performance a lot more than folks realize? Example, the length of the wire arm is a classic example. 2 extreme cases are a long arm version and a short arm spinnerbait. And yep, you're right, they also have their place. Here's the long and the short of it. A long arm spinnerbait is exactly what it sounds like. The long wire arm extends back to just above the hook point, making it a very snag-free lure, since the long arm acts much like a weed guard. It's the ideal style of lure to use when you want to work it over and through heavy cover, such as weeds, brush, and treetops. Now, some fishermen believe that the longer arm on a spinnerbait affects the strike-catch ratio of this lure. Well, let me tell you, that's absolutely wrong. A striking bass will compress the arm and find the hook. It's important to remember to rebend the arm back, up, and be sure that it's straight in line with the rest of the lure. Because if it's not, it's going to run off crooked. That's a key part. If the arm is bent, you want to tune it, lining it up with your line and your hook. That's very, very important. Okay, now let's discuss the short arm. A short arm spinnerbait is obviously short. The arm generally reaches no more than halfway to the hook point. This design decreases the lure's weedless abilities, unless it's manufactured with a weed guard. Short arm spinnerbaits, however, tend to flutter exceptionally well. The blade can't hit the hook and disturb its rotation when you pause your retrieve. The blade begins to spin on the drop and the lure flutters, helicopter-like, toward the bottom. And this is a highly productive way of fishing a short arm. If the lure is well balanced and is made with the correct blade assembly, you can feel the vibration as it falls. And a sensitive tip rod will also help. Now let's spend a minute and discuss another important component of the spinnerbait, and that is the hook. First, it should be a quality hook that you can sharpen to a pinpoint. Cheap hooks will bend and break with any amount of heavy pressure. A big, strong, sharp hook is extremely important to success. Speaking of hooks, let's talk about the problem of short strikes and what you can do to improve your strike-catch ratio. Now, active bass will knock the fire out of a spinnerbait if presented properly, but a neutral to negative fish will only kiss the back end of the skirt. And all you'll see behind your lure is a big swirl, or all you'll feel is a slight tug. Now, when this begins to happen, you can design the perfect little paddle or switch that'll fit his little rear end just perfectly. And that little paddle or switch is called a trailer hook. If the terrain will permit, adding this hook is an easy solution for short strikers. These are single hooks with a big enough hook eye to slide over the lure's main hook. As you can see, the second hook hangs just behind the end of the skirt and in good position to do battle. Although you can let the trailer hook flip-flop loosely on the main hook, it's usually better to fix it in place to prevent the swinging action. Now, a small piece of surgical tubing over the trailer hook eye will help hold the hook in perfect position. Just slide a small section of tubing over the trailer hook eye and wedge it over the main hook, which will keep it straight. To improve your odds even more, if the terrain will allow it, reverse the hook upside down. This will increase your chances even more. And since we're on the subject of components, let's discuss skirts and dressings. First, skirts come in two basic materials, look-alive rubber and vinyl. And my personal choice is rubber, because it provides much more action and doesn't stiffen up like vinyl. Plus, they flare out more than vinyl ones, creating a larger image. Another feature with rubber skirts is that you have far better control and accuracy on your cast because you've got less wind resistance with rubber. But regardless of what you choose to use, it's best to reverse the skirt on the lure to maximize its size and motion. Now for the dressing. Well, it can consist of pork, plastic, or foam. Are they necessary? Well, I think there are plenty of times when you add size, action, or even scent or looks to your spinnerbait, you're adding a ton of odds in your favor. Anytime you add an attractor to the hook on your spinnerbait, you first add buoyancy, which allows you to fish your lure slower, which is so important to enticing big bass. Secondly, you create a larger target that's attractive to bigger bass. And third, you achieve more action in your lure, which is very appealing to larger fish. Of all the different types of dressing I've used, from plastic to cloth to pork, I recently started using a new product called Strike Hide. It's made of a tough, flexible foam that works extremely well in both warm water as well as cold water. It's strong and has a tremendous amount of buoyancy and offers unbelievable action in the water on both the retrieve as well as the fall. It can be used naturally on spinnerbaits and works well on jigs. Okay, so much for the dressing. Let's discuss the split ring and the swivel that comes on a spinnerbait. And I can tell you right now, this is going to be a short discussion because there's no substitute for quality. A stainless steel O-ring and a ball bearing swivel will outperform anything else. All right, we're to the point where it's time to discuss that all-important subject, the spinnerbait blade. These little flashy guys are perhaps one of the most critical links in the chain of spinnerbait design. Now, blades come in 4 varieties: the Colorado, the Indiana, the Tennessee, and the willow leaf. Each one of them has its strong points and achieves different things. Colorado blades are very wide, kind of round shaped. They create maximum lift with a thumping type vibration. Their strengths are most apparent in shallow water when you want to create a gurgling sound and work a bait at a moderate to high speed. Now, the Indiana blades are a shade narrower than the Colorado, and they're kind of a sort of in-between or a compromise blade. They create less lift and much less vibration with an intermediate rotation and thumping vibration. Okay, if this one here, the Tennessee blade, is not the most widely used and accepted, well, it soon will be, for it offers approximately 20% more vibration and 4.5 times more flash than any other blade due to its rounded teardrop design and diamond pattern. It creates maximum lift, a wide rotation, and maximum low frequency vibration and tremendous reflection at a slow, medium, or fast retrieve. My most productive blade by far. Now, this old fella is called the diamond willow leaf blade. Its shape is long and thin. It creates minimal lift with little vibration and water resistance and works well on deep, slow retrieves. I'll tell you this, if you want to work it on the surface, you'll need a high-speed reel and will have to reel like crazy to keep it on top. As stated, willow blades produce very little vibration due to their long, skinny design, but they do offer a unique sound that's very attractive to bass. They also offer a tremendous amount of flash, especially the diamond patterns. They work exceptionally well in warmer water and are ideal for fishing in and around vegetation due to the shape of the blade. You know, when you think about it, most fishermen are visually oriented. They like to fish what they can see. And a spinnerbait is an excellent choice for fishing objects. A stump, a treetop, a log, anything in the water. But of all the different types of objects, as I said, like the stump, bushes, logs, treetops, boulders, and even boat docks, all bass anglers have their favorite. I know I do. My favorite is an excellent bass hangout. And this hangout is called a cypress tree, and it provides a tremendous amount of shade and cover as a result of its massive submerged root system. I think the reason I'm so partial to these towering giants is because I grew up fishing them. And guess what lure I learned to fish them with? That's right, a spinnerbait. They were my favorite object then, and today they still are. Naturally, they aren't found everywhere, but wherever I fish, if they're available, you can bet one thing, they'll see me chunking something at them. And that something would be a spinnerbait. Earlier, I had a lot of great things to say about the single spin. Now, I certainly don't want to imply that the double blade is not a top bass producer, because it is. I mentioned it works best close to the surface on a steady retrieve, and it's difficult to fish deep as a drop bait because the two blades tend to counteract each other during the dropping motion, defeating the purpose. However, if the lure is quality built and is perfectly balanced with a correct blade combination, it can pay off with great success. Here's a question I hear quite often. What about blade colors? Well, experience shows that silver or nickel blades work almost everywhere, and they're particularly strong in clear water. And it's the color or the finish I use almost exclusively, which we'll discuss shortly. But first, let's discuss the others. Now, plenty of spinnerbait fishermen swear by copper for stained water, while others prefer gold finish blades for stained to muddy water. And I know many fishermen that chunk only the rainbow colors, such as orange, chartreuse, and lime. And some anglers fish them all. If I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. Confidence is the greatest lure in your tackle box. If you believe copper is going to produce more bass for you than silver, gold, or chartreuse, or gold will catch you more fish than copper, well, I'll be the first one to tell you, you better not change. If you don't have confidence in the lure and the color you're fishing, well, you might as well go home and work in your garden or change to something you believe that'll produce for you. You know, a few minutes ago I mentioned that silver blades are what I use almost exclusively. Well, let me tell you why. First of all, it's the color, or I should say finish, I've got the most confidence in. And secondly, I put more importance in the color of the skirt than in the blade. It's a proven fact that bass can see colors. Therefore, what I really want them to see and bite is the skirt, because that is where the hook is. Since we're on the subject of colors and skirts, let's spend a minute or so and discuss them. Talk about something controversial. Color is something anglers will probably always disagree on. I have my personal thoughts just like anyone else, and I base this on past experience and the testimonials of many other good fishermen. Every color I've ever used has paid off at one time or the other, and that's why it's important to have a wide variety and a good selection for so many different conditions of water clarity that you face. Now, this little unit will help you take the guesswork out of which color to use at a specific time of day, depth, and water clarity. There's no doubt about it. Certain colors are more visible to a bass at certain times of the day. And that's governed greatly by that big shining thing right up there, sunshine, or light that penetrates the water. Light penetration governs the shape, the size, and color below the surface of the water. Okay, let's discuss a question I'm sure that's crossed your mind. What about a good selection of colors, sizes, and models for the tackle box? What should I have to start with? As we stated earlier, single spins are the all-around best performers. Tandem spins will outproduce singles under the right conditions. When stocking your tackle box, weigh your selection heavily towards singles, both long arms and short arms. And be sure to throw in a good assortment of tandems. And don't forget to think about the components we talked about, their weakness and various strengths. Now, as far as sizes go, you'll need a good assortment of, let's say, 1/4 ounce, 3/8, up to about 5/8 ounces, with a few of the smaller ones, like the 1/8 and the 3/16 ounce models sprinkled in. You know, if we tried to discuss everything there is about spinnerbaits, we'd be here till next week. But what we can do, however, is briefly show and tell you a little bit more about the effective spinnerbait retrieves, so that when you're faced with a specific spinnerbait situation, you can match your tactics to the conditions. There's the standard retrieve, the free-falling, flutter or dropping retrieve, the buzzing or waking retrieve, the slow roll retrieve, and the yo-yo retrieve. And where you use these different retrieves depends greatly on the location of your quarry. Okay, let's first start with the standard retrieve. Now all that is, it's a very simple retrieve. It was make you cast and just a steady horizontal pull with nothing fancy. No pauses or no drops, just a steady pull like we're doing right here. This works with either the single or the double model. Now this method is highly productive for active bass, but there's many times, as you well know, the non-aggressive times. All you got to do during those non-aggressive times, when you're fishing a spinnerbait, you want to change the action, and that's very, very important. You stop the retrieve. Once you stop the retrieve, what that does, it allows the lure to flutter, starting to fall. Then you start your retrieve again, and you pause again. By changing one action into another, creates an erratic action, and that can really trigger inactive fish into hitting. The free falling motion occurs when you stop the retrieve and the lure sinks toward the bottom or in a vertical type position. Once you stop the retrieve, the bait stops and naturally starts to fall in a vertical position with the blades spinning overhead. It's best when you're fishing it this way, is you're coming along steady. Now once you stop the retrieve, it's best to lower your rod tip as the lure falls, keeping a semi-tight line as you follow the lure down. And you stay in tune mentally with the lure as it's doing this. You're watching your line and you're concentrating for the slightest tap. A 6-pound bass sometimes doesn't feel any different than a pound bass, but you're concentrating on the slightest tap during the free-falling motion. Now this is a high percentage technique, and it's tailor-made for the single spin version. And it's a dynamic presentation for neutral attitude fish, or let's say non-aggressive bass. Okay, let's talk about the buzzing retrieve. Now all this is, you make the cast and you create a fast standard retrieve. What you're doing, all it is just a fast standard retrieve, where the blade wakes the surface with an inverted V and occasionally breaks the surface as it rides just under the surface. Now this technique is brutal on aggressive bass, and you can cover a country mile of water quickly with this type retrieve. Now this method works best with the tandem, and it's doggone good with a single spin. Let's talk about another retrieve, the slow roll. Now the slow roll is a very slow retrieve that either creeps along through the open water or crawls up through cover, such as treetops, limbs, or anything along the bottom. Just a slow, steady retrieve. Once you establish a depth that the fish are in, throwing that bait out, just a slow, steady retrieve, just letting it, nothing fancy. Just slow rolling the bait. This is exceptionally good in cold water or during those inactive times when fish are not that aggressive. Either bait will work, the tandem or, let's say, the single. Now, if the fish are much deeper, sometimes the willow leaf will work real well, especially when the water, let's say, is above about 70 degrees. But all this retrieve is just a slow roll is all you're doing. You're just rolling that blade right along. And it works good, as I said, as you work it around cover, climbing it up and over limbs, or another high percentage way of fishing, as we said, is throwing the bait out, letting it settle to the bottom, and just creep that bait along. Just real slow rolling it, just letting it touch the bottom every few seconds or so to stay in contact with the bottom. And another technique in fishing it like that, I found that I do a lot better if I'm going to fish an area like that, is by casting out and bringing the bait in from deep water into shallow water, let's say, versus staying out deep and casting in shallow. But the slow roll technique is very, very good. Okay, let's talk about the yo-yo retrieve. Well, what the yo-yo is a combination of a standard retrieve and a free fall. And what you do, you pump the rod tip up and down. This allows the blade to vibrate hard as you pull the bait up and spins lightly as the lure falls. You can yo-yo, say, a lure like this at mid-depths all the way down to as deep as you might want to fish it, even off of the bottom, by picking it up, letting it free fall back, picking it up, letting it free fall back. It works best primarily with the single spin. Now what I'm doing, I'm throwing it out. Once I get it to the desired depth, I let it fall. I'm yo-yoing it. Picking it up, I'm pulling up on it, letting it drop back. Pulling up on it, letting it drop back. The bait's kind of coming through the water in this fashion here. That can be a highly productive way of fishing it. Just casting it out, letting it fall, and yo-yo it. Pick it up, let it flutter down. Pick it up, let it flutter down. It's similar to the dropping type motion, but you can fish it at all different depths. You just kind of yo-yoing it, picking it, letting it flutter. Picking it up, letting it flutter. And another way of fishing it, if you've got fish suspended, say down deep under you, you can drop it straight over the side of the boat and vertical fish it, kind of in a yo-yo fashion. Picking it up. Once you establish the depth that the fish are in, lower it down to that depth. Or if you want to fish it on the bottom like that, drop it, pick it up, let it free fall back. Pick it up, let it free fall back. You know, there's no shortcuts to success, except to say that you got to do whatever it takes to catch fish. You got to experiment. The lure and the color that worked yesterday won't work every day. That's why you've got to be versatile. You've got to experiment to catch fish on a regular basis. The art of spinnerbait fishing is a lot more than just going out, tying on a lure, and thrashing the water. There are many fine distinctions to achieving the best success. Among these are properly matching your spinnerbaits to a particular time of the year, the time of day, the type of cover, depth, and water clarity. Now this takes time and experience. Success doesn't come quickly. But on the other hand, if you've got the burning desire to learn and you're willing to experiment, well, success can be only a cast away.